Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're taking on what might just be the ultimate philosophical challenge.
It's a big one.
Yeah, we're not just talking about ethics or politics. We are digging right down to the bedrock, the very foundation of knowledge, existence, and meaning itself.
Right.
Our sources for this are less a collection of different articles and more a single, rigorous, structured argument. It's a path that, it starts in absolute doubt.
Complete skepticism.
And it ends up concluding what the structure of reality has to be, what it must be, if we can know anything at all.
And that's the essential mission here, I think. We're trying to find a non-salacious foundation for epistemology,
Right.
for, the study of knowledge.
Right.
And this journey is so necessary because, as we'll see, our own tools, our reason, our senses, our memory, they all have these inherent flaws. We need to find a way to anchor truth.
And to do that, you have to look at how the world itself actually works.
You have to. And there's this ghost, as you put it before we started, that's haunting this whole conversation.
The philosophical boogeyman we have to get past, the diallelus.
Precisely. The diallelus.
Yeah.
It's the challenge of circular reasoning, this inescapable loop. So if I want to prove my truth-checking method is valid, let's call it method A.
Okay.
Well, I have to use a second method, method B, to check it. But then how do I know method B is valid?
You need a method C.
And on and on. It's an infinite regress. So the core premise we're going to explore is this. If knowledge is genuinely possible, which, is the starting assertion here, then the world's structure just can't allow for this regress.
It has to give us something else.
It has to provide an immediate, non-circular source of truth.
So that's the high-stakes mission for today. We're tracing this argument that our ability to know basic truths actually dictates the necessary nature of existence itself.
We move from how we know to what must exist for that knowledge to even be possible.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning of that path, with the siege, with doubt.
We have to begin with skepticism. At its most extreme, it's just the denial that anything can be known.
Which, right off the bat, has this funny self-contradiction, doesn't it?
It does. It's almost humorous. A true skeptic can't even know that skepticism is true, because that confirmation would be knowledge, which is the very thing they deny.
Right.
But let's look at why it's so compelling. The reasons for doubt really fall into two big categories. You have external reasons and internal ones.
Let's do external first. Most of what we think we know comes from outside of us. It's mediated.
Yeah.
Like, I read a history book, but how do I know the author didn't have a bias? Or that the sources they used weren't mistaken? Or even, intentionally fraudulent?
It's this cascading erosion of trust. You go to a doctor and they're repeating lessons they learned in med school 20 years ago.
Okay.
But how do you know the original research methodology was sound? Maybe the first studies were flawed, or, the cultural assumptions of the time just distorted how they interpreted the results.
And you can't check it. You can't personally go back and trace the lineage of every piece of knowledge to its origin to verify it.
You can't. You can't repeat the entire corpus of human scientific endeavor yourself. So you're always relying on a chain of trust.
And if that external chain is shaky, what about our own internal world? The internal doubt feels even more, troubling.
It's deeply troubling. We take it for granted that we are reliably perceiving a shared reality, but we can't be sure.
This is Descartes' famous problem, right?
It is. How do I know I'm not dreaming right now? Or to go even deeper, how do I know I'm not just a disembodied consciousness, a dreaming ghost hallucinating the feeling of my body in this very conversation?
The sources have this really potent analogy for this, the jaundice analogy.
Yes, tell us about that.
Well, if someone has jaundice, their cornea can get stained yellow. So everything they see, every object, every color, has this yellow tint to it.
Right.
But the person themselves has no external reference point to check their sight against. There's no way for them to know if the world is actually yellow or if their own sensory system is just flawed.
It's a filter they can't see.
Exactly. And the implication is that our entire sensory experience could be filtered through some kind of neurological yellow stain that we are completely unaware of.
And if our senses are that shaky, memory is. Well, it's even worse. We rely on memory to connect who we were in the past to what we're doing now.
But it's so malleable. Psychological studies have shown it's shockingly easy to implant false memories.
Oh, absolutely. You can make people believe they witnessed an event that never happened just through suggestion and repetition.
And what's really scary is that even our true memories, the ones we're sure about, are unreliable.
They're not like a file you retrieve from a computer.
No, every time you recall a memory, you're actually reconstructing it. And in that process, you update it, you weave it into a new narrative, which means the memory you have today is different and maybe less accurate than the one you had yesterday.
The classic example of this is the flashbulb memory.
Like where you were on 9/11.
Exactly. Those memories feel so real, so vivid and emotionally charged, and yet studies that follow up with people years later find significant, measurable errors in what they remember.
So the intensity of the feeling doesn't mean the data is accurate.
Not at all. And if you can't trust your most solid, reliable feeling memories, how can you trust any past experience you use to build your current knowledge?
This philosophical doubt then gets this shocking reinforcement from modern neurology.
It really does.
We assume our senses are this clear window to reality, but the research shows the brain isn't a passive receiver. It's an aggressive editor.
That's the perfect way to put it. Our perception is only tenuously related to objective reality. I mean, think about the time delay.
Processing lag.
Yeah. For light to hit your retina, travel up the optic nerve, and for your brain to process it, that takes about half a second.
Which is a long time if a car is speeding toward you.
It's disastrous for survival. By the time your brain fully processed the image, the car would be half a second closer than what you thought you saw.
So how does the brain deal with that?
It engages in predictive editing. Your brain doesn't show you where the car was. It runs these complex algorithms to predict where the car will be in half a second, and it shows you that edited image.
Wow. So we're literally seeing a manufactured, predicted reality.
We are, not the immediate objective one. And this explains why, say, a baseball player can misjudge a curveball. The moment the ball deviates from the predicted path, the brain's model fails.
And this failure of perception gets almost unbelievable with this phenomenon of change blindness.
Change blindness, yes. It proves that during rapid eye movements, they're called saccades, your peripheral vision is essentially worthless.
The brain just assumes nothing major changed.
It assumes the scene is stable, so it discards huge amounts of information. The sources cite that famous experiment.
The one with the door.
The one with the door.
Mhm.
A researcher, a student, asks someone for directions. They're interrupted by two men carrying a big wooden door between them.
And while the door is blocking the view for just a second or two,
They swap out the student for a completely different person. Different height, different clothes, different voice.
and the incredible finding is that most people don't notice.
The vast majority do not notice the swap. Their brain constructs a false but coherent memory that they were talking to the same person the whole time.
They saw a change, but their mind just filtered it out because it didn't fit the story.
This is devastating for epistemology. It means that what we call seeing or observing is often just an internal narrative we've built, and it's only loosely connected to what's actually out there.
Okay, wait, I have to stop you.
Oh.
Because this creates the ultimate skeptical loop, doesn't it?
Go on.
We're using the objective, rigorous findings of neurologists, findings they got from sensory experiments and rational thought, to prove that senses and reason are unreliable. So if the conclusion is true, that our thought processes are flawed, then how can we trust the research that led us to that conclusion?
That is the core trap. It is the circular skeptical loop. If our senses are unreliable, then the neurological findings are unreliable. If the findings are unreliable, then we have no scientific reason to doubt our senses.
It's a siege. Skepticism isn't just an argument, it's a siege against the very possibility of knowledge.
And we need an external, non-circular way out.
Which brings us to the formal name for this trap we have to solve. The diallelus.
Yes, the diallelus is the most restrictive problem. If I claim I know X, I have to justify it with some criterion, C.
Right. Your reason for believing it.
But then I have to justify C. For that I need C2, and for C2 I need C3, and it's ad infinitum. We can never reach a solid foundation because every foundation needs a prior justification.
Is there any kind of knowledge that gets around this, that bypasses it?
There is immediate knowledge.
Immediate knowledge.
The only knowledge that escapes the diallelus is knowledge where the knower is the source. So if I feel pain, I know I'm in pain. If I experience the sensation of yellow, I know I'm experiencing yellow.
Because the communication path, the distance between the source and the knowledge is zero.
It's zero length. It's immediate. There's no room for an error in transmission.
That knowledge is entirely internal. It tells me nothing about the external world.
Yeah.
My pain is real, but the stubbed toe that I think caused it might be an illusion if I'm a dreaming ghost.
And that is the philosophical wall you hit. This is the point where the standard responses, empiricism and rationalism, are forced to just take a leap of faith to keep going.
Okay, describe those leaps for us.
Well, empiricism takes a leap to accept what's called the principle of credulity. This is basically the rule that says, I will trust my senses, my sources, my memory, unless there's a specific overriding reason not to.
So they just decide to trust, even though that decision itself is unproven.
Exactly. It's caught in the diallelus. And rationalism does something similar, but it puts its faith in reason as the primary tool and only accepts the credibility of the external world as long as it conforms to rational thought.
So in both cases, the starting block is arbitrary faith, not logical necessity.
It is, which forces a conclusion on us. If we can actually know things, which is the premise we're running with, then the world must be structured in a way that knowledge is possible.
The worldview has to be one where the diallelus doesn't hold. We need a source of truth that is both immediate and reliable, but also external.
Before we can jump to that solution, though, we have to deal with the fact that the very tool we're using right now, reason, is just as sick as our senses.
It has the same foundational problem.
The same sickness. We have to look at the ways our own thinking tries to short-circuit this problem and how it usually just falls into, formal fallacies.
And the most basic flaw, as you mentioned, is trying to justify logic with logic.
It's perfectly circular. We can describe the rules of valid reasoning, but we can't validate the foundation of those rules without using the rules themselves.
So let's break down some of the common failures.
Okay, the first and most obvious one is circular reasoning, accepting the conclusion in order to prove it.
Like the example with the empiricist philosopher.
Exactly. They tell us to accept the principle of credulity because they're an expert, but we only know they're an expert because we've already used the principle of credulity to trust their claim of expertise.
It's a validation system that doesn't hook into anything real or external. It just floats.
The second one is wishful thinking. This is when you accept a conclusion because the alternative has bad or, undesirable consequences.
The example of being stranded on a mountain in a blizzard.
Right. I might desperately believe a rescue team must be on its way because the alternative, freezing to death, is just unacceptable. But my desire for a good outcome has no bearing on whether it's true.
And this is where we have to make a really critical philosophical distinction when we talk about big worldview claims.
This is vital. You hear people dismiss a worldview like, say, materialism by arguing, well, if materialism were true, life would have no meaning and that's terrible, so materialism must be false.
That's wishful thinking. The consequences don't determine the truth.
Correct. But the logically sound argument is different.
What's the sound argument?
The sound argument is, if worldview X were true, it would lead to epistemic collapse, meaning we couldn't know anything, therefore, we cannot know that X is true.
So you're not dismissing it because the consequences are bad. You're dismissing our ability to know it's true because the worldview itself destroys the very mechanism of knowledge.
Precisely. It's a much stronger, more valid claim.
Okay, and then we have the fallacy of fallacies.
Yes. This happens when you conclude that because an argument for a claim is false, the claim itself must be false.
This is really common in everyday debates.
All the time. I hear someone make a really poorly constructed argument for, say, life after death. Maybe they use some bad logic, so I just dismiss the entire idea of an afterlife.
But the weakness of one argument doesn't mean the conclusion is wrong.
Exactly. A true claim can just be supported by a bad debater. You can't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
So even when we're trying to use reason correctly, we often fail. And then there's this fundamental clash between our reason, which is relatively new, and our ancient hardwired intuition.
This brings us to what Darwin called his horrid doubt. If our most sophisticated mental abilities evolved from the minds of lower animals, why on earth should we trust them?
Our reason, our ability to do calculus, has only been around for, what, 1 million years?
Roughly. But our intuition, our gut feeling, has been tuned by 1 billion years of evolution that was aimed at one thing: survival, not discovering objective truth.
And sometimes the two lead to wildly different conclusions. These are the vertical paradoxes.
The Monty Hall problem is the classic example.
Right, with the 3 doors in the car.
Yes. Intuition screams at most people not to switch doors, that the odds are 50-50. But pure rational thought proves that switching doors doubles your odds of winning to 23.
Intuition, tuned for simple survival heuristics, just fails spectacularly when faced with conditional probability.
It does. And Simpson's paradox is just as jarring. It shows how a trend you see in separate groups of data can completely disappear or even reverse when you combine the groups.
Intuition says the whole must reflect the parts.
But reason proves that's not always true. So if we can't rely on our senses, our memories, our flawed logic, or even our evolved intuition, the search for a foundation becomes pretty desperate.
We have to find a source that comes before all these systems and validates them.
Which is why the diallelus forces us out of the immanent world and into the realm of the transcendent.
Okay, so we've established that if knowledge is even possible, we need a source that can beat the diallelus.
A source that's immediate and reliable.
But unlike our own internal feelings, it has to be able to tell us something about external reality. Let's look at what the sources call direct a priori knowledge.
These are the inescapable truths that we have to know before we can even start to have experiences. They're the scaffolding of reality.
Like what? What are some examples?
Well, we have to know, for instance, that we are not mad, that we are not currently dreaming, that concepts like truth and falsehood even exist, and most fundamentally, that there is a world out there beyond our own consciousness.
If we didn't know those things from the start, we could never begin to learn from our senses.
Never. Because you wouldn't trust the environment where the sensation was happening. So the criteria for this necessary first source of knowledge are incredibly strict.
It has to provide truth, and it has to bypass that whole need for prior justification.
The requirements are threefold. 1, the source must possess the truth. It has to contain the actual knowledge of reality.
Okay.
2, the source must be absolutely reliable. It has to be incapable of lying or deceiving.
Makes sense.
And 3, and this is the crucial part, the communication path from that source to us has to be immediate or functionally zero link, so it can't be intercepted or distorted. That's what avoids the diallelus.
And since we already established that anything in the world, an immanent source like a friend or a book, always requires indirect experience and a prior reliability check.
The only logical conclusion is that the source must be outside the world. It has to be transcendent.
Okay, so to justify this necessity of a transcendent source for our actual world, we have to look at the only worlds we can fully observe and test.
Which are the worlds of our own minds, our imagination, our dreams, the stories we create.
We need some definitions first. A thought is defined as an intentional, abstract thing.
Like your emotions, your convictions, your concepts. And a mind is simply the medium in which those thoughts exist.
Okay, so now, consider a dream. You're the dreamer.
Right. The entire dream world, its physics, its characters, its history, it all exists entirely within my mind. And crucially, as the dreamer, I am omniscient and infallible regarding my dream.
So if you dream that a character named Mary has red hair,
Then she objectively has red hair in that dream, period. Even if the dream character version of me is surprised by that fact, the dream is my thought, so I possess the truth. Criterion 1 is satisfied.
what about reliability and the communication path?
Well, if I, the dreamer, choose not to deceive the characters in my dream, then I'm reliable. Criterion 2, satisfied. And because the dream character's knowledge is ultimately anchored in my mind, the dreamer's mind, the communication path is effectively immediate. It's zero length.
So criterion 3 is satisfied too.
Yes. In every single observable world we can analyze, every story, every fantasy, every dream knowledge in existence are only possible because there is a transcendent mind. The author, the dreamer.
I see the structure of the argument, but hang on. Aren't we using the principle of uniformity here? We're saying because all observable worlds, like dreams, have a transcendent source, our actual world must have one too. Isn't that just another version of the leap of faith you rejected earlier?
That is an excellent challenge, a very important one. We're not treating this as a deductive proof at first. We're treating it as an application of the scientific method.
Occam's razor.
Occam's razor and the principle of uniformity, yes. The burden of proof shifts. If uniformity holds, the idea that fundamental principles are the same everywhere, then the structure of knowledge should be the same in the dream world and the actual world.
So if the materialist rejects this,
They have to postulate two fundamentally different kinds of worlds without any explanation. A world where existence requires thought, which is dreams, and a world where it doesn't, which is reality.
that violates Occam's razor. It's not the simpler explanation.
It's not. It forces you to accept an unproven exception. We're just looking for the hypothesis that is most consistent across all observable reality.
Okay, let's formally test the two big hypotheses against the criteria needed for knowledge, starting with the one that rejects the transcendent source.
Hypothesis 1. The actual world is without a transcendent mind. We can call this materialism. As we just said, this violates uniformity in Occam's razor. It also leaves these huge metaphysical questions completely unanswered.
Like the problem of unity. Our universe is this vast, complex compound, the many. What is it that unifies this collection of particles and forces into one single cohesive universe?
Right. Or what provides the identity of me over the last 10 years when almost all the physical matter in my body has been replaced?
How does non-intentional matter spontaneously create intentional, abstract minds?
What's the source of the laws of physics? What makes them uniform across billions of light years and billions of years? Materialism has no anchor for these concepts.
But the biggest failure you point to is the epistemic collapse.
This is the death blow. Without a governing transcendent mind, any potential source of truth, a scientist, a measurement, a logical rule, is an immanent entity. It's a thing in the world.
And we already established that things in the world can only be known by indirect experience, which needs prior knowledge of their reliability.
And you are instantly collapsed right back into the diallelus.
Back to the liar paradox. A collection of sources inside the world can't rationally declare itself reliable. The truth teller says he's reliable, but so does the liar, without an external, immediate reference point.
The difference between meaningful knowledge and, well, meaningless babble is impossible to distinguish.
So if materialism, hypothesis 1, were true, the claim itself, materialism is true, would be logically baseless. It would be meaningless babble.
It would have no foundation in objective truth. Therefore, we cannot know that materialism is true.
Which leaves us with only one other option.
Hypothesis 2. The actual world is with a transcendent mind. This one satisfies uniformity. It satisfies Occam's razor. All those metaphysical questions find their solution in the dream model. And most importantly, the transcendent source provides that valid, immediate anchor of truth that bypasses the diallelus.
But there's one more condition. To be a source of knowledge and not just reliable information, the mind has to be good.
Absolutely, because if the transcendent mind were capable of intentional deception, of lying, then even immediate communication from it would be untrustworthy.
It would be reliable information about a lie, but not knowledge of the truth.
Exactly. So we define love here as the intention or the will to be good to others. If this mind is loving and good, it logically must convey the justified knowledge of its own reliability and its own goodness to the world it creates.
And with that, we've completed the epistemic proof.
Knowledge is logically possible if and only if the actual world has a loving, reliable, transcendent mind. The simple observable fact that we possess foundational knowledge like that time exists, or that we're not mad, proves the existence of this unrestricted sovereign source.
So now that we've established the necessary existence of this transcendent mind, we can use metaphysics, the study of being, to logically figure out its fundamental properties.
Yes. And this is where the concepts of prior and posterior properties are so critical.
Remind us of the distinction.
When we analyze what must be absolute, we distinguish between properties that can exist on their own independently, those are prior properties, and properties that need an anchor in a prior property to even exist, those are posterior.
Okay, give us some clear examples of that.
Rest is a prior property. It can exist by itself, but movement is posterior. Movement can only be defined relative to something else that's at rest. Similarly, singularity, being one, is prior. Plurality, being many, is posterior because it's just a collection of singular units. True is prior. False is posterior, defined only as a deviation from the truth.
And crucially, goodness is prior.
And evil is posterior. It's defined only as a lack of or a deviation from goodness.
So if the transcendent mind is the ultimate unrestricted source of all reality, it can't have any posterior property.
It can't, because if it did, it would need a prior anchor outside of itself to define that property, which would violate its unrestricted ultimate nature.
If it had movement, there'd have to be something else at rest. If it were plural, there'd have to be a prior concept of singularity.
Exactly. And this leads us directly to the metaphysical proof of goodness.
Because evil is a posterior property.
A deviation, a lack. The ultimate source of reality cannot contain it. Therefore, the transcendent mind is necessarily free of evil. It is perfect. By the same logic, it must be single, it must be simple, and because it governs this infinite world of thought, it must be omniscient and omnipotent.
It's fascinating how a purely logical requirement for knowledge immediately generates moral and physical perfection in the source.
It does, but it also immediately runs us into the observed reality. We've just derived that the mind is perfect and loving, yet our world is, well, it's full of evil and suffering.
The classic problem of evil.
Yeah.
How do you reconcile a perfect, good source with an imperfect, flawed world.
To do that, we have to define what goodness means for intentional beings, like us.
It has to involve freedom.
It must. Goodness for intentional beings requires the possibility of free love. A loving mind wants love from its creation, but, compelled action isn't love, it's just robotics.
So that freedom has to include the capacity to choose against the mind's intention, to choose wrong, to choose evil.
That's the necessary byproduct of granting freedom, but then the question is, why doesn't the perfectly good mind just discard the whole dream when its free beings choose evil?
You wouldn't just throw away a corrupted file.
No, because true love, which we've established the mind must have, is unconditional. The sources use the analogy of a parent who won't discard a handicapped or rebellious child. The mind can't just throw away a reality it loves, even if that reality has chosen to deviate.
So instead of being discarded, the choice of evil creates this structural barrier, a state the sources call quarantine.
Quarantine, yes. It means the dream is no longer directly and perfectly ruled by the mind's intention. The link between the mind's perfection and the dream's execution has been compromised by the intentional deviation of its inhabitants.
And this explains the presence of impersonal evil.
Exactly. Suffering that isn't directly caused by a human choice. Earthquakes, tsunamis, diseases. These are the result of the world's structure operating at a kind of distance from the absolute perfection it was designed for.
And this structural deviation, this quarantine, then confirms why immediate knowledge that isn't immediate from the source, is so unreliable.
It results in two major influences that block perfect knowledge. First, you have lying, which is intentional deception, the active choice of evil. And second, you have errors and personal faults in the world's processes, systems failing, accidents.
These are the direct result of the quarantine's structural compromise.
Right. The mind has to inform us that we shouldn't be totally naive. We have to recognize we live in a world where things fail and people deceive.
Let's shift gears a bit to ontology, the nature of what exists, and tackle that problem of the one and the many. If our universe is a vast compound, the many, what is the one that unifies it all into a single entity?
This point of coming together, this ultimate anchor of unity, it can't be immanent. It can't be an object in the universe.
Because if it were, it would need to be unified with the rest of the universe itself, which puts you back in an infinite regress.
Exactly. Matter can't unify thought, structure can't unify intention, and this gives us the ontological proof.
Which states
that without a transcendent mind thinking this unity, holding the entire compound universe together as a single cohesive thought, the particles and forces just couldn't cohere into one universe. They'd be a loose collection of disparate things.
the unity of being requires a non-material transcendent source of intentional thought.
And this also neatly solves that ancient philosophical debate over universals or abstract things.
Like, does the number 2 exist? Does redness exist on its own, apart from red objects?
The solution in this model is really elegant. You just redefine existence. Existence means being thought of by the transcendent mind.
Okay.
Since the transcendent mind is the source of all reality, and since our minds are also intentional and can think abstract concepts, any notion we can think of, redness, joy, even a unicorn, exists as a commonality anchored in that transcendent mind.
So when I try to teach a child the concept of justice, I'm not teaching them some arbitrary human idea. I'm pointing them toward a universal concept that's anchored in ultimate reality.
Precisely. That's the difference between relative existence, the particular red car in front of me, and objective existence, which is the abstract concept of redness held by the ultimate source.
Okay, so we're transitioning now from the objective structure of reality, from metaphysics to our subjective experience within it, to existentialism.
Right. And how we relate to the world.
We relate in 3 ways: tertiary, secondary, and primary. Let's focus on the difference between tertiary and primary relating.
Tertiary relating is the scientific, objective view. We treat things, including people, as objects out there. When science looks at a human being, it just sees deterministic particles, or, at best, random, unpredictable quantum fluctuations.
So from that perspective, behavior is either fully programmed or it's just random.
That's all it can be. But when we experience life from the inside, we feel something totally different, and that's primary relating.
The internal subjective view of the self.
Yes. Others can observe my neural patterns firing, but I am the one who feels the weight of a moral obligation. Others can try to predict my decision, but I am the one who experiences this intrinsic freedom to choose one way or another.
And that intrinsic freedom is absolutely crucial for the concept of responsibility.
It is essential. It has to be what philosophers call libertarian randomness, the genuine capacity to choose A or not A. If our choices are predetermined by physics or biology, then the thief and the judge are just particles following their paths.
And the concepts of justice, praise, or blame become meaningless.
They become meaningless. Our internal experience confirms our freedom. We feel the decision, we feel the obligation.
But this creates that famous tension. How can we be genuinely free if the transcendent mind, being omniscient, thinks all the thoughts of the world, and the world seems to operate under deterministic laws?
This is solved by what the sources call transcendent compatibilism. And to understand it, you have to distinguish between the ontic level and the economical level.
Okay, break that down.
The mind's existence and intention, that's the ontic level. It's the ultimate reality prior to the world. The physical laws the world operates under, that's the economical level. It's the system the mind uses to run the dream.
And the key point is that the mind, which is ontologically free, can respect our freedom even while it's governing the economical laws of the world.
The mind respects our freedom like a parent gives autonomy to an adult child. The child makes real choices within the parent's home. So the mind is free to dream a world that operates by deterministic rules in such a way that those rules result exactly in the situation he intends, while fully honoring the free choices we make.
Can you give us a model for how that might actually work, how a free choice gets encoded into the physical world?
The sources suggest two models. In the first, the mind, being omnipotent, thinks the interaction of particles across the entire universe, the movement of every distant star, every cosmic ray, in such a precise way that when those particles eventually reach Earth and interact with our brain, they exactly encode and enact the free choice we have already made.
So our choice is the cause, and the particle interaction is the effect orchestrated by the mind.
It's like writing a script for a play where the actors choose their own lines and the author writes all the stage directions around them to make those lines happen perfectly.
What's the second model?
The second uses quantum mechanics, the idea that reality is inherently vague until it's observed, the wave function collapse. The mind doesn't have to dream every single detail like every leaf on every tree. This inherent vagueness is the very mechanism the mind uses to insert our intentions into reality.
So our intention steers the collapse of the wave function.
Yes. It translates our free decision into the seemingly random, vague movements of particles in our brain, which then embodies our choice within the economical rules of physics.
Okay, moving into ethics. This transcendent foundation seems to provide the solution to that most persistent problem in ethics, the isot problem.
Hume's guillotine, yes. The idea that you can't logically derive what ought to be from what is observed in the natural world.
But if the transcendent mind thinks the world, and that mind is necessarily perfect and good, the problem it vanishes.
It does. If the mind thinks that something is good or ought to be done, then it is objectively good and universally obligatory. The standard is anchored outside the immanent world, in the source of reality itself.
This also seems to finally resolve Euthyphro's dilemma.
Right. Is something good because the mind commands it, which would make it arbitrary? Or does the mind command it because it's good, which would make the mind subject to some external standard?
What's the third way?
The third way is the resolution. Goodness isn't arbitrary, and the mind isn't subject to an external standard. It's good because the transcendent mind thinks a world in which it is objectively good, that establishes the standard as prior, and then commands it because it is objectively good. The standard is intrinsic to the source.
Okay, so let's talk about the consequences of our deviation from that good, the choice of evil. If we violated absolute goodness, justice demands reparation.
It does, and since the mind is both fully just and fully loving, it has to act to repair that damage.
We have the broken window analogy with the 4 possible options for reparation.
Right. Option 1, the wrong is just ignored. A good mind can't do this. It violates absolute justice. Option 2, the perpetrator pays the price. This is just, but if the price for rejecting absolute goodness is infinite, it's unloving because it eternally destroys the free being.
Option 3, a third innocent party pays the price.
Which violates justice against the innocent party.
Which leaves only option 4, the only one that satisfies the need to be both fully just and fully loving.
The mind must pay the price itself. This leads to the incarnation mandate. To repair the world without violating either justice or love, The mind must enter the world, enter the dream, and incarnate as a human being.
And only by being fully human can the mind experience the full punishment for all human evil.
Yes, because even the smallest wrong is a rejection of absolute goodness. The price is infinite, and only the infinite source can pay it.
And our response to this ultimate payment has to be one of solidarity?
It does. We have to choose to enter into solidarity, into mutual identification with this incarnated mind. It's a necessary choice, like a partner accepting the terms of a partnership, to accept the payment made on our behalf and restore that relationship with the absolute source.
Let's turn to teleology, the philosophy of purpose and meaning. We noted that under materialism, absolute meaning is impossible.
It is, because the universe faces an inevitable heat death or collapse. All human effort is eventually just lost to cosmic entropy.
But as the transcendent mind thinks the world, then our world finds its intrinsic meaning in the mind's goals and intentions.
That is the foundation. You have extrinsic meaning, which is imposed from the outside, like a man deciding a branch is a good walking stick. But intrinsic meaning derives from the source's own intention.
And since the mind is perfect, it connects that intrinsic meaning with happiness.
Yes. We find true happiness when we align ourselves with the purpose for which we were meant to exist. Like a bird finding joy in flying or a fish in swimming.
This objective source also solves the problem of intrinsic value and belonging.
Absolutely. If you limit yourself to the actual world, you're adrift. If we're just particles, what determines belonging? Who says the particles that make up my left ear belong together, but the left eyes of everyone living in Beijing do not?
Only a transcendent mind can create true intentional belonging.
Anchoring our identity and value outside of just mere physical proximity. The search for meaning, love, and belonging inside the immanent temporal world is always going to be disappointing. It leads to temporary satisfactions that are often masked by, constant entertainment or guilt.
Okay, our final implication is in aesthetics, the philosophy of beauty. If materialism were true, objective beauty is just impossible.
It is. Beauty would be nothing more than subjective neurological wiring. My brain happens to be wired to react positively to the golden ratio or the complexity of a rose.
But I could theoretically rewire my brain to find a pile of garbage objectively beautiful. The beauty is just in my reaction, not in the object itself.
And if that were true, the composer of a symphony wouldn't be admirable. We'd just be admiring the happy accident of our own brain wiring. So the aesthetic proof confirms that without a transcendent mind, the source of objective goodness and perfection, no objective, universal beauty is possible.
So beauty is a glimpse of the perfection of the source reflected in the dream world.
That's it. And if beauty is objective, then good art has a very specific role.
Yes.
Good art expresses a profound longing for the absolute, for absolute goodness, absolute justice, absolute love. It either gives us a brief glimpse of that transcendent beauty or, conversely, it powerfully illustrates the brokenness and the distance from it that's caused by the quarantine.
And bad art.
Bad art just focuses on finite values, glorifying a fleeting human victory or a temporary political regime.
There's this concept that good art tells more than the artist knew. That seems really profound here.
It is. It speaks to us because it touches that anchor of objective truth, even if the artist themselves consciously rejects that anchor. Take Shelley's poem Ozymandias.
The broken statue in the desert.
Exactly. It describes this ruined statue built to glorify a mighty king whose power has completely vanished. The king's power was finite. He ordered the work based on temporary, finite values.
But the poem itself, by contrasting the king's boastful inscription, "Look on my works, ye mighty in despair," with the desolate, endless desert, it achieves something infinite.
It does. It highlights the ridiculous finitude and impermanence of all human power, and in doing so, it points negatively to the positive truth of infinite, everlasting power and reality.
So Shelley, whether he meant to or not, used the destruction of the finite to prove the necessity of the infinite.
Good art resonates because it connects us back to the source of objective value and beauty that we were designed to seek.
So we began this deep dive with this paralyzing realization that we couldn't trust our senses, our memory, or even our logic. We were trapped in the diallelus.
Literally trapped.
And the overwhelming conclusion, which was forced on us by the very possibility of having any foundational knowledge, was the necessity of a single, unrestricted, loving, and perfect transcendent source.
And once established, that foundation immediately anchored all of our reality. It explained the structure of objective logic. It solved the ethical dilemma of the eyes and the ought. It provided the necessary basis for genuine human freedom.
And it endowed the universe with objective meaning and beauty.
And on top of all that, it explained the existence of suffering and error through this mechanism of quarantine, which was itself necessitated by the choice of free, intentional beings.
The ultimate philosophical breakthrough here seems to be realizing that the existence of this mind isn't really an issue of belief, it's an issue of logical necessity.
It is. If you accept the premise that we possess foundational knowledge, the rest follows, really, inevitably.
And that argument transforms the whole philosophical inquiry.
It does. The question is no longer if such a perfect, loving mind exists, but rather, how do we choose to relate to it? We discuss those modes of relating. Tertiary, where we see ourselves as deterministic objects, and primary, where we experience ourselves as free, intentional agents.
So, a final thought for you to take away from this. If our freedom is real, if it's confirmed, and if moral obligation is an objective call from a loving mind that has paid the price for our necessary errors, what is the first step you take to shift your primary self-perception away from being a passive, deterministic object and toward being an active, free, intentional agent? The knowledge is direct. The choice and the responsibility that comes with that freedom is entirely ours.